Hi everyone, Angus Campbell here, and now we're back onto the E35SS Fury to progress that. Now we're at a certain stage with the A70 Lightning and can't really do too much in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So what I've done is taken the Fury engine as it is now and some of the parts from the storage boxes, and let's just recap where we are. So when we last left this, what we were doing was taking the gearbox apart again, because a bearing at the back of the gearbox housing, i.e. the lay shaft bearing here, which is a needle roller, was incorrect in that it wasn't a blind-ended bearing. It was the correct size but the wrong one. It wasn't quite seated properly, so we need to kick off by putting the correct bearing in there and make sure that's seated, and then we put a thrust washer on there that's pegged as well, and the peg is there, so that's good. And then we can put the gearbox internals back in and then start to fit up the inner and outer gearbox case on this side. One of the problems we were encountering not long after I got the engine back from some engineering work was that there was a bit of a gap between the crankcase and I think it was the outer cover when trying to present the outer cover out up to the inner cover, and that just smacked of something not fitting quite rightly internally, and that's what and investigations led to, I say, a number of issues associated with bearing fitment. So let's have a look over here. So here's the inner cover, inner gearbox cover, and here's the outer. So essentially the inner gearbox cover goes like so. That's it. And the outer like so. And they do fit and line up fine with no internals. When you put the internals in, there's a slight issue. So that to address first. The other element that we were looking at the time, I think, is that just trying to remember, is that we were doing some work on on the cams to make sure they were turning nicely and they're sorted. At the moment, as you can see, we've got the cam chain tensioner in position, but we are going to take that apart now, because one of the jobs for today, the first job really, is that there's a few parts that we want to create a mould of so we can get some patterns made between well, a friend of mine who's building a Fury and other interested parties too who have got an interest in the Fury, and what we want to try and mould up again after a first failure by me is we've got this is the main stand stop that fits the frame. This is a bob weight off the Auto Advance unit, which I've taken apart there. The Auto Advance unit is unique to Fury and Bandit, and we're just wondering whether these bob weights are actually non-standard as well compared to bob weights on Auto Advances for other models of the same year. And the final piece is the reason why I want to take this apart is because there's this cast aluminium spacer here, and again that's very unique, so we want to take a mould of that as well for some reproductions to be made. So what I'm going to do is set you up on the bench and then we'll get concocting this, which is going to be a bit of a job and could be very messy and certainly could be dangerous unless we're wearing some protective gear. So let me get you set up and we'll crack on. Right, okay everybody, we're set up on the bench, and this episode of the Fury build looks a bit more like an episode of MasterChef. But anyway, here we are. So what we've got is a pot that we're going to make our mould from. So we'll be placing the parts that we require a mould of just into the bottom of this, cleaned and into the bottom of this, and then we'll mix up some silicone goo with catalyst in the proportion of 3% catalyst, well mixed but not too vigorously so we don't get any air in, and then we'll just pour it into our tub with the items in the bottom, cover them, and then let it set for several hours. Obviously getting the proportions of catalyst and silicone is absolutely key to this. So with full approval from my wife, I have a glass measuring jug from the kitchen which should clean up okay after the silicone is set. We should be able to just pull it off, clean that up. So we can measure the silicone probably about, I would think we'll probably need 300 ml or so in here. We'll measure out the catalyst with a pipette, and as I say, we want 3 ml, and this is graduated in millilitres or centimetre cubed, whichever you prefer, and we'll see how that goes. So first thing, the first thing is not to mix, because I just need to remove one of the parts that we want to mould from the engine, which is the cam chain tensioner spacer. So let me do that and I'll bring you back. Okay, so we've got our 3 parts. We've got the cam chain tensioner spacer, which is now like casting. We've got the main stand stop. This mounts on the inside of one of the rear engine plates, and it's just a metal stop. There's no rubber, but this just prevents the stand from returning too vigorously and hitting some of the other engine components and frame components. It's not a stop, I think, which is designed for the stand to be permanently engaged with it. Otherwise there'd be a lot of rattling around, going over bumps, etc. And the final thing then is one of the Auto Advance bob weights. So we just spread those evenly apart in the bottom of the mould. Just thinking about which is the best way to do this, actually. That's probably the best way. And then we'll go ahead and mix the goo. So I'm just going to get some protective material. For this stuff, gloves are absolutely a must. I've also got some protective eyewear, and I've also covered my hands and arms in barrier cream, which I do regularly anyway, because you probably noticed I usually work with bare hands. I hate wearing gloves for mechanicking, so I always use barrier cream. So let me get kitted out and I'll bring you back. Okay, right, gloves on, protective glasses on. First thing then is to measure out some goo. I'm going to estimate that I'll probably want 300 to 400 mil, and I've got a couple of pots of this silicone here. So we'll open this up first. One of them's been leaking. So there's this silicone goo all over the place at the moment. So let's try and get this out, and we'll use all of this and chuck this away because it's an absolute mess. Lid's off. Just measure this out and see how much we've got. Now the parts that we want to mould that are in the tub here, they're the depth of that is we'll probably need 1 inch to minimally cover, I think, in that tub. Bearing in mind the surface area of the base of the tub is bigger than this mixing jug, and we've got about 1.25 inches there. I think we're going to need to use the contents of this other tub of goo that I've got as well. At the moment it's looking like we've got about, by the time this finishes draining out of the tub, we're going to end up with about 300 mil there. I think we're going to need a little bit more. So I want to take it up to 400 mil, and then that will leave me enough room in the mixing jug to do the mixing without spilling it everywhere once I add the catalyst. So 400 mil means that we'll need 12 mil, 12 mil of catalyst, 3%. Oh, let's get rid of that at last. What a mess. Well, that's quite handy actually. So this is just about going to, all of it's going to take it up to about 400 mil. I'm looking at this jug from the reverse side of the measuring graduations. And we're just about there. Yep. Okay, there we go. And that's just about all of it gone. So away with that. Yep, 400 mil. So now we've got to make sure the catalyst is very well mixed, because there are multiple components that do settle out. So I've got 400ml, 3%, so that's 3ml per 100ml, 4 threes are 12ml. Now what I've also got is a stirrer, which is an old stud, but it's metal, and I've cleaned it up thoroughly with the wire wheel. Some people use wood stirrers, etc., but there might be all sorts of contaminants in wood that you can't necessarily identify. So I think metal is better, and it will clean up all right afterwards. Now this stuff does take several hours to cure, so it's not as though we've got to mix it very quickly and chuck it in. That apparently the key to all of this is, one, making sure this catalyst is very well shaken before you use it, and secondly, once you add the catalyst to the goo, that it's extremely well stirred in thoroughly and evenly, but not too vigorously so as to create a lot of bubbles. Okay, that's well mixed, top comes off. Pipette some up. That's on 15, so we want to go, let's think, that's on 15. It's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, that's 8. That's on 16, so we want to go up to 20. Like so. Put that back. Put the top on. This stuff's bloody lethal. I don't know what it is. The sooner we get the top on that, the better. Like so. Right, and we'll start to begin to gently stir this in. Looks like those are going to take a little while actually, but they do advise in the instructions to sort of fold it in, which is what I'm doing. Yeah, and it's going. And ultimately, as you can see, it attains this pink hue. Okay, so now that's been really well mixed. I noticed there are a few little mini bubbles in it, but there's not much I can do about that. So what we'll have to do now is, once this is drained off, we'll gently pour this into the mould in such a way so as not to move the parts too much in the bottom, although it wouldn't be a problem if the parts moved out to the side. We just don't want the parts too close together. go. So I'm just going to do a trail initially in between each of the parts to sort of stabilise them a little. There we go. And then just basically cover them. Now I'm doing this fairly slowly because one of the parts, the cam chain tensioner, has obviously a hole that we want to try and fill as much as possible. So to make sure the much of the air as possible comes out, then just add this very slowly, but it's going in pretty well. Okay, and now we'll just keep adding until we cover. And there we go. I think that's more than enough. Now air bubbles are coming to the top, which is good. And basically we'll just put that to one side. Do a bit of clearing up quick. Okay, so just a few minutes later, and air bubbles are still coming to the top, and which is very good news, and bursting at the top. It's quite interesting to watch, to be honest. So that's going well. Happy with that. Now I don't know whether you can see this, but the pipette has broken. I was just picking it up, thinking what to use to clean this. And it's fractured, and actually there's a number of cracks in it as well. Now whether that's because this is plastic, I don't know if it's plastic or glass actually. I think it's plastic. Whether the catalyst has reacted with it or not, I don't know, but anyway, it's had it, so I don't need to clean that anymore. I will keep the bulb from the end though, because we'll have to get a replacement. Yeah, in fact it's falling to bits as I try and pick it up with the pliers, so it's just falling apart. So what that catalyst is, I don't know, I can look it up, but it's pretty toxic. So that's that job done, and what I'll do is leave that a few hours and come back to it and finish off when it's set.